Welcome to She Speaks, Women's Wisdom for Every Woman, a space for us to feel seen, celebrated, connected, and inspired. Here, we come together to tell our stories, share our lessons, celebrate our unique strengths, and reconnect with the sacred feminine wisdom that exists in all of us and guides us towards a lit up life of peace, empowerment, purpose, and prosperity. I'm Shar Wilson, your host and owner of Wilson Phoenix Wellness. I'm a mind body wellness content creator and coach, helping high performing professional women transform from burned out to lit up through a holistic wellness approach. And each week, you're invited to join me and my special guests in heartfelt conversations on holistic health and well being, resilience, and living authentically. Whether you're navigating life's big changes, seeking deeper purpose, or simply craving connection and inspiration, you'll walk away with bite-sized brilliance as we uncover empowering insights and practical steps to help you create a life of balance, joy, ease, and fulfillment. And today I'm joined by my guest, Daveda Schmidlin. So Daveda and I, we met last year in a business community and I think became pretty quick friends. I just love your energy. Our lifestyles are very similar. We're kind of like living a non-conventional life on the road in tiny homes and RVs, and I was just drawn to your energy very quickly. Today, Daveda is joining us, and we're going to dive into all things alignment, subconscious decoding, and rewiring. But first, let's welcome Daveda to the show. It's my honor and delight to have you here, sister.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yes.
Always love talking up those topics.
I know. And Daveda and I could talk all day long, so we'll have to do our best to
Yeah, we'll have to behave.
Stay within the podcast guidelines, behave. But Daveda is an alignment coach. She is a mom, a wife, a grandma. How many grandbabies? Four. And Spring Chicken, you just turned the young age of what, 50?
50. Yep, I just had my 50th birthday.
You bring a wealth of wisdom and insight on how to decode and rewire our subconscious mind. There's so many times I know in my own life, and I hear women all around me saying, I feel stuck. And you talk a lot about that on your platforms, but you are helping women to break out of that stuckness and naturally, effortlessly grow and transform those inner blocks, those mental blockers into power and momentum. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that from you and your expertise today, but also really key for you is how you are using that as you're navigating big life transitions, which you have navigated quite a lot. Interesting fact for our sisters listening, Daveda, she had to grow up pretty early. She became a mom at barely 16, navigated through life and, a lot on her own through very traumatic experiences, some really difficult environments. And I think you've come out pretty well on the other side. So share with us your story, and then the one key lesson that you would want other women to know from that experience.
Yeah, so when I say barely 16, I mean like by a hair. My birthday is January 28th, and my oldest son, who is now 33, was born February 19th. So, I mean, like just barely. And I think back when I had him, one of the things I had going for me was that I was just very stubborn. And I really just had this, whatever, I'll figure it out, I'll make it work kind of an attitude, even about having a baby at 16. I mean, obviously I went through a lot of emotions and questioned, like, should I do this? Can I do this? And when I got to that point where I was like, no, I'm keeping this child. Like I'm, that's the only option for me. I just figured I'll figure it out. Like, it sounds very flippant to people. Like, you don't just figure it out. But even as a mom, when I was older, with each kid, you do just figure it out because they're not all the same, right? Like, it's always different. Like, I had 3 grown sons, and when they were small, they were all different. But yeah, that was really hard. I had to grow up really, really fast, and be responsible for another person. And during those early years, I didn't always make the right choices. I didn't always choose the right friend group. I got myself involved in, excuse me, periods of life where, I made a lot of mistakes. But the one thing is that I've always learned from my mistakes. And, as I've learned and navigated forward, I just got to a point where I wanted to not continue on the path that I was currently on. I've always been somebody where I kind of always knew there was something bigger inside of me. And even when I was living my life in a way that wasn't like aligned with who I truly am, like I kind of knew it. Like, like I sort of knew it. I just had never seen anything different. So I didn't know how to do anything different. But I think each time we get to a place where we're ready to up level, the opportunities that we need, the people that we need, they show up for us, and they take us to that next step, and they kind of like pull us, like there's an energy there that just like pulls us in. And I just remember waking up one morning and thinking, this is not what I wanted to be when I was a child, right? Like I don't remember, being a kid and wanting to be, continually broke, hanging out with people that had no dreams, no vision, or anything. I wanted to do something different. I didn't really even know what it looked like, but I just took one step and then another step and then another step. And, something that I even tell my clients today and I live by is that stuck is not a place, it's a mindset. Like it really is just a mindset. Like you're never truly stuck. I mean, unless you're a fly stuck on one of those pieces of paper hanging in somebody's garage, like you're not stuck. You just need a perspective shift. There's always a different perspective. So I think like, growing up really, really fast. And then, my childhood, I grew up with my biological father was a drug addict. Like there was just a lot of stuff in my childhood prior to having a kid so early that was really traumatic that I had a lot of healing to do from. But all those things can be like springboards if we allow them to be. It's not necessarily, I made it in spite of. Right? Like I made it in spite of, and I refuse to be a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I'm an overcomer. I'm an achiever. And all of those things, as unfortunate and difficult as they were, they gave me some kind of wisdom and knowledge and lesson or compassion or empathy or something that I can take with me. And now because of the work that I do with people and the work that I've done, I know that we don't have to stay there. Like those things no longer exist. We're no longer living in our past. We're living in our present. So that's kind of like, I guess, a bite-sized piece of, my story and how I got to where I am. And it's also given me a passion for helping women not stay back there and to move to a new space that they want to be in, that place inside that they're like, I see something bigger. I just don't know how to get there. But if you see it, you can get there.
Yeah. And I want you to wrap that up, package it up for the sisters that are listening and tell them in this moment, because a lot of them are probably nodding their heads being like, yep, similar experience. I had a rough childhood. I had to grow up really fast. I've gone through some really hard things, but I am a fighter. I am a survivor. There might be other sisters on the call who are feeling very, very stuck in their life in the moment. They feel what you said of, this is not what I dreamed of. This is not the life I dreamed of when I was a kid, and I feel stuck and I don't know how to get out. What, from your vast experience, from an early age, pre-16, having a kid, to now 50 and looking back on all of those big moments, what's the one lesson that you want to share with women? If there's nothing else they take away from this podcast today, if they stop listening after this moment, what is it that you want them to know?
I think what's coming up is don't settle. Like if you can see it and you can dream it, there's a way. And it isn't about knowing exactly how it's all going to work out. Like there's some beauty in ignorance. Just take one step. Right? You don't have to know exactly what it's going to look like. And I think I've mastered not knowing what it's going to look like. I mean,
yeah. Tell us about that. Give us a little insight into
that's my title, Shar, the master of not knowing.
That's your title, the master of not knowing and knowing. Like, yeah, give us a little hint of what you mean by that right now. Literally what's happening in your life. Tell the sisters that are listening. So they're not, yeah, that sounds nice, but you don't actually know. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I know. Like the last 2 years of our lives have been one massive transition with very few like affirmative answers. So my husband came home in December of 2022 and told me that the plant that he worked at, which we were in Illinois, but we're originally from Ohio, just like to give you a little bit of background around this story too. He came home and said, you know, they're closing the plant. We only have like a couple of months left. So we're going to be completely and totally like out of work. They don't know where we're going. Everything's up in the air. And it was just like, oh crap, like what are we going to do? We don't know where we're going to live. We don't know what we're going to do. The one thing that we did know is that we weren't going to be staying where we were. So shortly after that, my husband came home and he said, I have an idea, and just hear me out before you shoot it down. Yeah. And before I tell you this story, am I allowed to cuss? Like,
yes.
Okay. Okay. So
you're real here on this podcast.
Okay. So he was like, he comes home and now our plan, he had 5 years before he's going to retire. And our plan was to buy an RV and travel for a little while and figure out where we wanted winter to be. Because we're, you know, in the Midwest, we want to be here in the summer with family, not necessarily in the winter. So he comes home and he's like, what would you think of selling everything we own, buying an RV now? And then like we were hoping that we would get transferred back to his home plant, which is Ohio, but there was no guarantee that that would happen. He's like, that way, wherever they send us, we have a home. Like we have a starting point. We can figure it out when we get there. And at first I'm like, are you fucking nuts? What? No. And then I was like, okay, wait, you asked me to think about it, right? Like you don't stay married for, 28 plus years by not at least thinking about what someone else is presenting. Yeah. So I took some time and stay liking each other. I took some time to think about it and I thought, why not? Like, what do we have to lose? So we sold everything we own, including like our big, beautiful house that I still miss sometimes. I don't miss being in Illinois though. And we we sold everything. We bought an RV that we love. We actually have fifth wheel. And we headed back to Ohio hoping that, my husband would get moved into a plant. We had a plan. We were going to RV full time in the summer, and then we were going to house sit in the winter. And the first year that worked out swimmingly. And then this year, some things changed for us again. One is my father-in-law passed away. So there was a lot of grief. We're all very close with him, but also very fortunate that we were here. 3 months after we got here, he was diagnosed with cancer. So we were able to be with him on that journey. So it was no mistake that we ended up back home when we did, right? Like it was all very divinely orchestrated. So then when he passed away, we also inherited a house. We never thought we actually wanted to live in the house, but our other two sons were going to kind of like stay. But we do have we have a shed with all of our things on the property. So we also couldn't just rent it out to a stranger. You know what I mean? Right. And then some things changed with our house sitting this year. My mom and my stepdad decided they weren't going to be going to Florida because my sister had a baby. So a lot of things just changed. So again, it was like, okay, and this house needs a ton of work. It's a massive undertaking. We were driving back and forth. And so we just decided it only makes sense for us to live here in the winter and then, stick with the plan. My husband is back to work at his home plant, but it's still very unstable. They could close that plant and tell us, oh, well, now you have to go to Texas for the last 3 years, right? We still don't know. But there's been just a lot of change. And so I've had to be really, really good at just going, okay, if anybody's like a Friends fan, you know the scene with Ross where he's like, pivot, pivot, right? Like that's another name, like master of the
The
pivot.
pivot queen.
Yeah, and it's like not being too stuck on this is how it is, this is how it's going to stay. Sometimes things are the way they are for a minute, and you have to be able to be okay with just like making a shift.
Yeah.
It's
You
been like
said
that for 2 years.
you said something earlier that I want to bring back up. You said, I've always learned from my mistakes. At an early age, you just had the mindset of, I don't know, but I'll figure it out.
Hmm.
Like this sense of trusting, I'll figure it out.
Hmm.
And the words that you used was you navigated forward,
Yeah.
which I love that. Tell me more about that for sisters listening who are a little bit more like me, who are like, let's control the outcome. I need a plan, I need a strategy. There's a lot of high achieving sisters on this call listening, and they're like, navigating forward, pivot, pivot, pivot. Please tell me how. So,
Yeah.
in your wisdom and your life lessons, what does that mean navigating forward? What does that look like
Mhm.
practically?
Yeah.
How can they do that when they're kind of in this in between stage of life?
Yeah. So, first of all, like I get the control thing because that is very much something that I've learned to work through. I mean, because really at the end of the day, if we're being truly real, control, and I'm making air quotes for anybody listening to the podcast, is an illusion.
Mhm.
We do
Say it
not
again. Say it again for everyone in the back.
control is an illusion. We do not have control. I mean, we have options, we have choices, but we do not have control at any moment. Anything can change that is beyond our control. You know what I mean? Like we had a plan. Like we had a plan for retirement, um, and thought that we had some kind of control in that. But when that changed and it became outside of our control, and I guess this is also an answer to your question, when things change, you look at what do I have? What am I working with today? It might not be what I was working with yesterday, and you make a decision from today. It's kind of like, I know this is, you hear this said a lot, but it's like if you're driving, you can't get where you're going by looking in the rear view mirror. You want to just continue to look forward. I mean, Matt and I even sat down and said, okay, with everything that's changed, does this plan for retirement still are we still on the right track with everything that we're doing? And we said, yeah, like we are, right? Like we don't need to change anything else. But I think like moving forward, that really is the key, is looking at, but what am I working with today? Because the past doesn't exist anymore. Like if we really think about it, if I tell you, go find, that birthday when you were 5, it doesn't exist. That person doesn't even any longer exist. That's over. So we can't base tomorrow on something that no longer exists, but we have the present. So it's really about just being in the present and continually checking in with yourself and looking at what options do I have today, and then just picking one option, right? Like it's just picking one option and taking one step forward. And then that one step forward is going to lead you to the next option and the next option. I think a lot of times the reason that I see people get stuck, and I've experienced quote unquote stuckness myself in the past, is because I'm looking for steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I haven't even picked step 1 yet. So just pick step 1, and then, you don't know what's going to come from step 1. Oh, there's my step 2. Oh, there's my step 3. Oh, there's step 4, right? And then you just continue to like ease into and almost be magnetically pulled
Hmm.
into what is next for you.
Yeah.
So
So
I
when
hope
you
that
think
answers your
about
question.
it did, and I have another question coming up. So thinking about like, your area of expertise as an alignment coach and how you've used alignment to guide you more gracefully and with a little bit more humor and lightness
Yeah.
through life transitions, which is a skill. That is a skill. I think some people are more naturally gifted than others, but that is a learned and practiced skill. So how do you kind of like tap into that alignment piece to even make your first choice? Because I know there's probably a lot of sisters listening that are thinking, I don't know how to even make that first choice. Yes, I
Mhm.
feel stuck because there's 10 choices, but how do I tap into my alignment, whatever that means, to make choice one? What would you say to the woman asking that question?
Yeah, well, first I would say that's a fantastic question.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
and the second thing I would say is there are no wrong choices.
Oh, that's a great answer. Say that again. Say that again.
Right? So sometimes we don't make any choice because we're so terrified that we're going to make the wrong choice. But there are no wrong choices. There's only navigating forward. And so it's either going to result in what I wanted or it's going to result in a lesson that's going to get me closer to what I wanted. So you just make a choice, and making no choice is making a choice, which isn't going to get you anywhere, right? But then I think it's also, and this is maybe something that is more of like a learned, kind of a learned thing that we have to practice, but you can start today learning it. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and I said, when you think about, so if you're looking at option A, option B, right? If I think about option A and I think about what does it feel like to have done it, and it feels light in my body, then to me, I'm like, okay, it feels light in my body, which means it's pulling me. If
Yeah.
I look at option B and I'm like, what does it feel like to have done it, to have it done? It's already done. I'm envisioning it done. What does that feel like? And it feels heavy. Then that's not the direction that I go. And I get that, like, there is like a practice to that, to like being able to really like kind of sink into your body and tapping into like light and heavy. But you can start with really small things, even little things like what is what is calling me this morning? Is it like a cup of coffee? Is it a cup of tea? When I think about having done it, like, what does that feel like? That's where I started. I'm like, okay, well, when I get up in the morning, like, what should I drink? I mean, I know that sounds kind of minuscule, but you'll learn to recognize what that feeling is of like light and heavy. But this conversation I was having yesterday, I had said, around doing this, and I'm like, okay, give me some feedback around what you're feeling. And it was like, well, I feel light this way and I feel heavy this way, but I don't want to not do something just because it feels heavy. And I'm like, but there's a difference between heavy and hard,
Mm, yeah. Tell
right?
me
Like,
more about that.
yeah. So, like, to me, we don't shy away from hard. Like, there's a lot of things in life that are hard, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not useful,
Yeah. Yeah. The hard
right?
is usually the bigger teachers,
Yeah, it is in the
unfortunately.
hard. It is in the hard, right? But the heavy, that internal heaviness where you just have this, "Meh, meh, meh,"
Yeah. The
that's to
sinking.
me, that's the sinking feeling. That's a sign from God, the universe, your higher self, that that's not in alignment, that that's not for you. Doesn't mean it's bad, whatever. It just means it's not for you. So that's what I mean by like in helping people like learn to tap into and just flow with that lightness and let that pull you, and learning to trust in that.
Yeah. If there's been a theme across every single podcast episode that I've done so far, it is wise women like yourself saying that exact message of we must start using our bodies to make
Yeah,
decisions, not
yeah,
our minds. We
yeah.
have been misinformed and incorrectly taught in a very like masculine way that we use our logical analytical minds to make
Mhm.
decisions, when in
Yes.
fact we should be tapping into and leveraging our body's wisdom to
Hmm.
make decisions. Now
Yeah,
for
and
those women who are like, but I don't know how to do that yet, they're still figuring out, because that's like working with subtle energies.
mhm.
And if you had told me that a few years ago, I would not have known how to do that because I was so disconnected from the sensations in my body. I was so logically, analytically driven. I have a natural mind for operations and order. So I've had to really work on that. So I want to offer for the women who are in that position of, I like this idea of using my body to make decisions, but I'm still working on how to even feel the
Mm-hmm.
sensations in my body. I would say for those women who are nodding their heads of yes, that's me, do a little bit of a logical exercise very quickly as well. When you're coming up against decision A, decision B, short term, long term, what's the impact there? Start
Mm-hmm.
with the logic. Give yourself like 5 minutes, and then shift over. Take a few breaths, drop in, and feel just like what you offered. What would it feel like
Mm-hmm.
living with this decision? What would it feel like living with this decision? And then use both.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to the logical too, sometimes it even helps like to ask yourself when you think about it, does this take me where I want to go? Is it actually what I want, or does it just sound good? Like, where does that lead me? And then where does this lead me? I mean, so that's another really logical way of like, which path does that take me down? And is it what I want my life to look like? Even just within like Shar, you and I have had this conversation before around, what do you want your business to look like, but also to feel like, right? Like, what do I want it to look like? What do I want it to feel like? And making decisions. So it's not like you just completely like take your brain out and put it in a jar, right? Like
Right.
we're still using our minds. They're
Yes.
brilliant, they're there for a reason. But like when you learn to do both, because your mind, like your subconscious mind is controlling 95% of everything. Only 5% of everything that we know, do, thoughts, patterns, emotions are part of the conscious mind. So if you think about it, like, and then not the subconscious is created a lot even before the age of 7 to 10, like prior to then. So if you think about it, like we have a lot of grown 7-year-olds running around trying to make decisions
Mm-hmm.
like based on what. And so I think that yes, learning to ask yourself some really good questions around, does this take me where I want to go? And does it feel the way I want it to feel? And then dropping into your body. And another thing I wanted to add to that, Shar, is if you're in a space where you don't know yet, like you haven't really learned or leaned into that practice of tapping into your body, um, I also think doing some mindful meditation is really useful, even if it's just like for 5 minutes. And I want to explain what I mean by that, because sometimes people
Yes.
think, mindful meditation or whatever, it's like they're like, no, I just keep thinking about stuff. But
Yes. Yeah.
it,
Give
it
us the
really is,
practical.
yeah, it really is. It's not about trying to turn your mind off. It's more about letting whatever comes up come up without judgment, and just letting it process through, right? So like I always like to imagine, like as the thought comes up, I acknowledge it and then I let it drift off. And then as the next thought comes up, I acknowledge it and I let it drift off. And so it's kind of like just learning to be with yourself. And I think that's a really good starting point for people who are like, yeah, I'm hearing what you guys are saying, but I don't know where to begin. That's also like a really good 5-minute spot that you can start doing today.
Yeah. In your work with women, and I know that you work with a lot of women and people as well, that they're coming to you saying, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. And you said earlier, stuck is not a place, it's a mindset. And this is really where you shine. I love that we just naturally segued into the subconscious mind. What, if you could change one belief that you've seen in women that holds them back, that keeps them from navigating forward and using those kind of hardships in life as the springboards for leveling up? If there was one belief that you see holding women back, what would it be? And what would you say to her?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think this is a belief, but this is what's coming up for me to share is that um, it's attaching meaning, right? Like things only mean what we appoint them to mean, and sometimes things don't have to mean anything. I think that a lot of the time, one of the things that gets people stuck is the meaning that we attach to outcomes, to our behaviors, to our thoughts, to our patterns, but they don't have to mean anything. They only mean what you make them mean.
Yeah.
And so, like, in a nutshell, I think that in and of itself is really powerful, that it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you that that situation changed. It doesn't mean anything, that you made that mistake, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything. We attach meaning to things that hold us back because typically the meaning we attach somehow devalues who we are at the core of our being. And that's a lot of time what makes us feel stuckness. So I think that the belief is that things mean something
Yeah.
about us.
Yeah. That everything has some kind of deep meaning. And we are meaning making creatures. That is something that the mind, the subconscious mind is always doing to make sense of the world
Yeah. Yeah.
around us.
But if we like, I want to, I just like, so if we look at trying to think of an example, um, if if I make a choice and it turns out to not be what I thought it would be or what I wanted it to be or whatever, and I attach a meaning to that. Let's say the meaning I attach to it is I don't make good choices. The meaning that I'm attaching to that is actually what's keeping me stuck,
Mm.
not the actual action. Because if we think about, let's say two people do the same thing, one person attaches a meaning to it, the other person doesn't, that second person is going to continue to move forward and the first person's going to stay stuck, not because of what happened, but simply because of the meaning attached to it.
Yeah.
So I would say removing that belief that things have to mean something, they don't.
Yeah. And
If
I'm
you're going
thinking,
to make it mean something that's useful and you moving forward.
right, right,
Right?
exactly. Like our mind is a little bit of a trickster.
Yeah,
And so why not use it to our advantage?
yeah,
You know, if our mind is going to tell us stories anyway, why not use the power of our imagination to help us navigate forward?
yeah,
The image that's coming up for me is in Inside Out 2. Have you seen that
yeah,
movie?
yeah,
Oh, I love it so
yeah.
much. Where Joy and the gang of like the fundamental emotions and anger and envy and fear, they all run into there's like an imagination house of cards,
Yeah.
and anxiety is on the big screen, and she's forcing all of the little like jelly bean workers to come up with scary scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And joy is like, no, she's like wielding this little girl's imagination against her to drive her,
Yeah,
instead of, what if this really cool thing happened?
yeah,
What if something wonderful could come from this moment?
yeah,
So I love that. It's really about, like, we get to assign the meaning to things. So if we
yeah,
have that power, you might as well assign a meaning that propels you forward, instead of assigning a meaning that keeps you stuck or sends you backwards in time. Did I hear that
yeah,
correctly? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, just like exactly. It's the meaning that we attach that keeps us stuck a lot of the time. And so it's like either it doesn't have to mean anything, or if you're going to make it mean something, always ask yourself, is that useful?
Yeah, I love that question. Is that useful?
Is it useful? Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. You will
perfect.
hear me say that like so many times, like, okay, but is it useful? And it doesn't even necessarily matter sometimes if it's true, because if it's true, but it's not useful, then it still doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically useful to you and where you want to go, what you want to be feeling.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Is it useful in the flow of your alignment?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a helpful question. Is that useful for me?
hmm
And what do I want to feel
hmm
from this decision?
Yeah.
Super helpful. So to wrap it up, um, what is one what is one small actionable step? We've talked a lot of things, subconscious mind and unstucking yourself and using your hard life lessons to navigate forward. What's one small actionable step that our sisters listening to this call can take today to improve their life experience and unstuck themselves?
Yeah. Um, I mean, in addition, I feel like we've given a couple. So I think in addition, a small actionable step is to, the first thing I would say is get clear with yourself on where you actually want to go. And that can be as simple as like journaling, like journaling, letting it all out, hitting record on GarageBand on your phone and just letting all the stuff like come out of you and then go back and re-listen to it. I think sometimes the other reason we get stuck is because we're trying to go in a direction that doesn't any longer align with us, but we've been in such a habit of just going this one way. And it's like, the red light's on and the green light's over here flashing, but we don't even see it because we haven't gotten honest with ourselves yet about what we truly want. And so I would say an actionable step would be to start with today, go journal, go voice dump, right? Like just go get it out of you. And whatever that looks like, just look at like, okay, what's one small thing that I can do to start taking a step in that direction? And it doesn't have to be big. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, I'm sure you have, but it's like that quote that says, we underestimate what can be accomplished in a year and overestimate what can be accomplished in a day. You're not looking to make massive changes today in this one step. You're just looking to get started.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just about, it's planting you today. It's about digging the little hole. And that's like going and journaling or dumping and checking in with yourself to see what you actually want. And then, the next step is planting that seed. And then the next step is covering it with the dirt, right? So it's like, if that's the space you're in, the starting point, I think, is always getting really honest with where you're at and does it still align and where do you want to go?
Yeah. Which takes so much courage. I know you and I both ran the gauntlet of that last year in our businesses and making some pivots in our identities as coaches. And I know for me, I did a lot of like identity release work and releasing a grip on titles. Who am I in this season? And I gave myself permission. I think that was the word that's coming out for me. I'm giving myself permission to be really honest with what I want. Yes. In my life, in my relationships, in my business. And that first step took a lot of courage. And I just kept going back to that. Give myself permission to speak what it is that I want.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not ready to speak that vocally. That feels too scary. So journaling is a great place to start.
Yeah.
And then you can start to whisper it. And then you can start to speak it to other people.
Yeah. And I think we could do a whole other podcast just on that topic alone, right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 5,000 thoughts coming to my head right now.
Yep.
But the one thing that I will add to that is as you're going through that and you're getting really honest with yourself, a lot of the time, the reason it's hard is because in order to move forward, there are things we need to let go of that have gotten very comfortable. Even though they don't, it's like, your feet grew a size and you're still trying to shove your foot into a size 7 and you're now a 7.5. It doesn't feel good anymore, but those are the shoes you're used to wearing. So you just keep putting them on. Like it's time to size up, and what do you have to let go of in order to do that? And yes, it takes this like journal, talking to your phone, right? They seem like these really simple things, but like you just said, Shar, it is one of the most courageous things that you can do is to be really honest with yourself and be willing, or at least be willing to be made willing and to get willing, right? Like you don't have to be willing yet. You just have to be willing to say, okay, I'm not willing yet to let go of some things, but I'm willing to explore it. Like start there if you need to. it's courageous, and it is a very powerful starting point, even though it might seem like, oh, write some things down or say some things or whatever, but it's a very powerful to really truly do it and lean into it.
Yeah. And it's courageous because it's not what we've been taught as little girls, as young women, as grown women. We have not been taught to be honest with what it is that we want. We've been taught how to shape shift, how to be pleasant and pretty and fit in and go with the flow in that way. We have not been taught to really get honest with what do I want and why do I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of that, I think a lot of women, myself included, it took a while to get that honest with what do I want, because on the other side of that question is, and what am I willing to give up to have that?
Yeah.
It is a give and a take.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one practice, I'll add this on, that if you're not ready to journal, if you're not ready to go be with yourself in that way, go clean out a closet. Like,
yes,
remove some things that no longer fit you as an act of release and see how that feels. See where that takes you.
Yeah. I know we're rounding here across the finish line, Shar.
Yeah.
I just want to add something that just came up that I didn't mention in the beginning when you asked me about like becoming the master of the pivot and everything that we had been through.
Yeah.
So another interesting thing that had happened is that, so I had done this manifestation program, and I sat down one day and I wrote down exactly what I wanted to get out of it. And I remembered saying, I can't remember word for word, but I remembered saying as I was writing, like, I just kind of felt like life had become routine. And I was just like, I needed to shake it up somehow. Right. So I write this all down. I have my candle out. That was in the morning. That's the exact same day that my husband came home and told me that he was losing his job. Like, the same freaking day. Yep. Like, holy shit. Like, here we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience when I was let go in corporate world. So it's like, when we ask for things to shift, when we ask for things to get unstuck, be prepared.
Yeah.
Be prepared for the shifts to happen.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, you have to release control.
Because control is an illusion anyway.
It's an illusion anyway. I love that. I'm going to end with that quote. We have options and choices, but we do not have control of anything outside of ourselves. We have options and choices.
Yeah.
And there is no wrong decision. Just make the choice, learn the lesson, pivot, and enjoy the ride.
All forward.
Yeah. I love this conversation. It's been so good. Will you tell us, how can our sisters find you if they want to, know more about you, tap into some of your services, any upcoming events that they should be aware of? How can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Pretty much I have a presence. I hang out the most on Facebook. But the other thing is, if you go to any of those platforms and you look through, I do have something that I recently started a few months ago that I'm excited about. It's the Rebel Ambitions podcast membership. And basically, and I named it Rebel Ambitions because the meaning behind that to me is like those of us who are wanting to do things in a different way, like not according to all the noise that we hear out here, around us, but according to that drive that's coming from inside of us. And so Rebel Ambitions is basically like a behind the scenes look at what's going on in my thoughts, in my business, in my life. Like I share like some personal things in there, stuff that you won't find out on social media. And it's kind of like I looked at it like having like a little mentor in your pocket, right? Like just little tiny bite-sized pieces of like encouragement or perspective shifts or a way to look at something. So that's, up for the taking. I am in the works on creating a few more things, that people will be able to tap into, but right now that's kind of been my main focus. So if that's helpful to anyone, you can meet me there, or you can just come check out, whatever I got going on social.
What's your Facebook handle?
It's just Daveda Schmidlin.
Okay, cool. I will include those links and a link to your podcast subscription in the show notes. So, sisters listening, be sure to check that out. And with that, it is goodbye for now. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Davida, for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great.
Sisters, we are so glad you joined us today on She Speaks. I hope you leave feeling seen, inspired, connected, and ready to take one step closer to living as your true self. Remember, the wisdom we seek is often found within. Keep shining, keep speaking, keep listening to your inner voice and your body's wisdom. And join us next time as we continue this wisdom journey to wholehearted living. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star review and share it with the beloved sisters in your life. Be sure to check the show notes for ways to connect with Davida, as well as some resources that I'll be offering to support you on your journey to health and happiness. We love you, sweet friends, and I will see you next week. Bye.